coffee, big cup, and hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Gilmore Way Podcast. This week, we're taking a look at the portrayals of gender on the show, which are always kind of held itself as being progressive and feminist, but now in 2023, we can peel back the layers of the depictions of gendered expectations and understand why this show wasn't hitting the mark in the early aughts, nor even by 2016.
Sherry's baby shower is a great time to talk about this, I think, because it shows how we put these expectations on kids from birth and how socially constructed and trendy some of this stuff really is. But before we get into the discussion for this week, this is your regular reminder that this is a spoilers all podcast. Proceed at your own caution if you don't want spoilies. And if you could quickly do those YouTube-y things, like, subscribe, comment, and share, we would be ever so grateful for your support. It means a lot, and it really helps us out. One last disclaimer, if I seem low energy or a little out of it, it's because I am. I've got a bit of a head cold going on. So I'm going to blame it on the brain fog and the Advil daytime. And Laura, I know you've had a lot going on the last couple of weeks and are really tired yourself. But Gilmore sustains us. So I think this will be a fun conversation as long as we can do the words putting into sentence doing.
I say that as I'm needing to yawn, which is terrible, but yes.
Yes. All right. Let's survive this and get going. Let's do our synopses.
Yeah, let's get right into it. We're going to kick things off this week with 8 o'clock at the Oasis. And Emily invites Lorelai to an auction where she meets a cute guy, but she doesn't get his name or number. So in an attempt to track him down, Rory prods Lorelai to bring it up to Emily, who says that he's Peyton Sanders and that she gets a number for Lorelai because she knows his mother. He returns her call and invites her to a David Bowie concert, which is a promising start, but their preliminary date goes horribly and they decide not to see each other again. But this is unacceptable to Emily, whose social position might be jeopardized by Lorelai's disinterest in continuing the relationship. Lorelai is also approached by the new neighbor to water his lawn and his African violets while he's out of town for work. While trying to turn on his sprinklers, Rory faces some trouble when she can't reach Dean. So Jess steps in to help, and the tension is delicious.
Season 3, Episode 6 is Take the Deviled Eggs. Rory receives an invite to Sherry's baby shower, and when Lorelai offers to drive her to Boston so she can go shopping, Sherry ropes them both into attending the party. Lorelai is the only mother there, and Sherry has an uncomfortable conversation with her about how great Chris has been with her and about the baby since he came home from that wedding he went to with her. Jess buys a used car from Gypsy, but Luke is suspicious about where he got enough money to buy a car. Sherry sends Rory and Lorelai home with leftover deviled eggs, and as a way to blow off their steam about being mad at Jess and Chris, they devil egg Jess's car. Meanwhile, in Stars Hollow, the town loner wants to stage a protest, but of course Taylor doesn't want to allow that, so Reverend Skinner and Rabbi Barons agree to let him protest from the church, but his message is thwarted when his banner rips. What was he protesting? We'll probably never know.
This is not the focus of the conversation tonight, but the protest banner scene is one of my guilty pleasure moments from the entire course of this show. And we will tinfoil theory this one day when we do a tinfoil theory episode because it will come. I have thoughts on what he was protesting. And we may never know, but I don't think I want to know at this point. That was just the not knowing, I think, maybe even makes it even better. But case in point, I love that scene, and I love the entire congregation of Stars Hollow just being like, what?
I mean, he very clearly wanted to stop the noodle scoos. I don't understand where the confusion lies, because it's clear as day.
Can you define noodle scoos for us?
No. Unfortunately, I cannot. Again, brain, no worky. But again, very weak segue into our actual topic this week, which is gender, which is something that's almost as difficult to define.
Yeah. Ooh, where do we even start?
Let's start with some basic definitional stuff. As much as I say it's hard to define, there are some basic factors that we look at when we say we're having a conversation about gender. So it is it's the social psychological, cultural, and behavioral aspects of being a man, woman, or other gender identity. So this covers a huge swath of things, really, like, the wide swath of human experience, basically. But I think most pertinent to this discussion is the sort of like sex-based social structures, like gender roles, and also gender expression. So there's a lot that we could say about gender and the current discourses around it. And frankly, there are people on the internet who can do it better than I can. I can't speak for Laura, but I know that like I've learned a lot from other people. And so I'm not going to try to like sit here and expound on it, because that's not really what we're here to do. It's huge. It's complex. It's contentious. And so I really want to look at it from the lens of the Gilmore Girls show, in the expression of like the traits, the habits, the dress, so like costuming, and the social roles and expectations that sort of come to the forefront from our characters, especially Emily. Like, I think Emily is going to be a really interesting topic, but she's certainly not the only place where this crops up in the show. And I just, I don't want to like go too far off into the weeds about stuff. Like, it's a really, really interesting topic, and it's something I've been looking into for a long time, just because, I have friends who are non-conforming and who are more exploratory with their genders, and I want to understand it better. But I just want to, again, keep it to Gilmore Girls, because again, that's why we're here. But I want to point out as something of a disclaimer that this conversation is also going to be heavily shaped by the ideals of white femininity and like westernized ideas of gender specifically, because that's what this show is about. It doesn't do a great job at addressing other experiences of womanhood or of gender. And so that kind of lacks relevance to this discussion, but it's still a fascinating topic. The internet can do a much better job of explaining it than two white girls. I recommend Shan Spear's video on gender performativity and the surveillance of womanhood as a good place to start if you're interested in other types of stuff. But I think we should, especially for the sake of time, just keep this particular discussion limited to Gilmore Girls, and that necessitates like white privileged high class femininity. So we don't want to purposely ignore it. Like, I don't want you to think that we're not addressing it, but it's just not as pertinent to this conversation.
Yeah, and just bouncing off of that too. We're not going into this conversation taking it loosely or disregarding any of the notions that are just really prevalent and important to so many people in this day and age. If there's something that we don't cover, it's not for ignorance or for a lack of dismissiveness. It's because we know that we're not going to be able to get to every single aspect of the umbrella that this topic entails. So we don't want to have anyone who's watching this think that. And if you are watching, I also want to preface this by saying I can speak only for myself at this point. Kate, feel free to echo. There is a lot that I personally do not know, and there are mistakes that I make within this topic and within this conversation, and pronouns and gender roles and gender dynamics, which is what we're talking about. I'm not perfect with it. I don't know nearly enough about it. I will slip up. I could even slip up within the context within this conversation. And if I do, I apologize in advance. We're not here to offend anybody. We're not here to trigger anybody. We are here to have the most healthy and well-rounded conversation that we can have about this topic. If we misstep in any way, please know that that is not our intention. We're here to try and, again, talk about this topic in the best way that we can as it relates to Gilmore Girls as a show, which, as Kate said, will be our focus tonight. But we're still learning. We're still actively learning. There's always knowledge to be gained. So please take everything that we're saying with a grain of salt and know that we're imperfect, but we're going to do the best that we can with this conversation and try and make it as entertaining to anyone who's watching as possible.
Yeah. At the end of the day, this is a pop culture podcast, and as I said, there are video essayists out there who have more expertise than we do. And I love learning from them. I love watching videos on this kind of stuff and going down these rabbit holes. But we already talk enough as it is. And so I really want to take what I've learned from those people and try to apply it to the show. But that also limits the conversation in a number of ways. So that's just sort of like a general, blanket disclaimer before we get started. So where shall we begin?
Well, we've broadly defined gender and the gender dynamics. I think we just need to kick it off going right into the show because, again, that is our focus. That is what we're here for. I'm going to lead in with the most basic and broadest of questions that I think I can pose to you. How does the show tackle gender dynamics? I think Amy was writing this show trying to insert a feministic perspective. I don't think she did it as well as she could have, and I don't think she broke down those barriers as much as she thought that she was, or that she wanted to, or that she could have. But how do you think that she wrote this show well in that regard? And what are some instances within the show that you see gender dynamics being put on display either in a largely healthy or unhealthy way?
Yeah, huge question. And a great place to start. The sort of meta conversation about the writing and the period from which this came out of when, we were still kind of in that early third wave of feminism. And Amy has famously said that she doesn't do message shows. And so I think there was an element of that sort of like cultural feminism as opposed to a more ideological feminism that she was inserting into this, that sort of female power kind of vibe, as opposed to I am explicitly trying to make this ideologically feminist. And in so doing, and again, this could just be a product of the time, she sticks to a lot of conventional gender roles. And some characters are meant to be progressive and to push against those, antiquated ideals of femininity and masculinity embodied by Emily and Richard Gilmore. But I think the show, again, it could just be a function of the fact that like we just didn't know as much 20 years ago as we do now about all this stuff. And so like, I don't know if we can fault Amy for this, but this is like the result is that it's not as progressive, I think, as it wanted to be. It wasn't as successful in advancing that ideal because it was still so steeped in the conventions of the time. And that's part of the reason I have an issue, like not entirely, but part of the reason I have an issue with calling the show properly feminist. It has a few great moments, but otherwise it really just plays into gender convention quite a bit. I think one way in which that manifests is like, is it really being a proponent of a woman's right to choose if the choices are still so socially limited and defined by markers of femininity? Like, so you have like one or two more options, but like it doesn't do a good enough job of maybe exploring all of the options. And granted, no show can do it all. This show has a topic and a voice and a theme that maybe doesn't lend itself well to other portrayals of stuff. And we can't necessarily hold that against it, but it's still a very narrow definition of femininity or feminist like portrayal at the time. And it's still steeped in internalized misogyny in a lot of ways. And it doesn't try to contend with that at all, really. So it's only part of the way there. And in a way, that's a good thing. We often need to iterate on these things. It's not going to happen overnight. Not everyone's going to do a perfect job of it. They still had to exist within constraints of, what the network wants and what the prevailing social attitudes are at the time. And if they were trying to write some like wildly feminist, progressive show at the time, it probably would have been shot down immediately, especially on a network like the WB. So there's that. And I guess going to the second part of your question, I go back to Emily and Richard Gilmore. Even in, let's take 8 o'clock at the Oasis, one of our episodes for this week. Emily is worried about her social position when, like, trying to set up Lorelai and Peyton goes poorly, and she's worried about losing her spot in, like, a social pecking order at tea time, basically. And is this the one where she goes up like, Lorena Bobbins, Lorelai, Lorena Bobbins? Yeah. Because Emily's spheres of power are fairly small. Like, that's where she wields the most control and the most social capital, is in moments like that. And so when Lorelai's decisions and beliefs jeopardize that, Emily becomes she becomes like susceptible to trouble, shall we say, in her world. And Lorelai doesn't give a crap because she never cared about that world to begin with, and she thinks it's vapid. But to Emily, it's a very real concern that she will lose her standing and her power.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I want to keep us right with Emily and Richard because I feel like they're a fantastic example for us to, again, begin this conversation with. We've talked about Emily and Richard's marriage before, but I think it bears even more conversation now because they obviously entered into this marriage, I think, with very clear expectations of what they were going to expect from one another within the gender dynamic roles, what society would have expected from them, but also what they were going to expect from one another. Do you think that their marriage was unhealthy because of those gender specified roles that were innately put upon them, not even from themselves, but just from, again, what society and what their upbringing would have expected from them?
That's a really excellent question. And it has kind of triggered a thought in me that I hadn't fully considered before, or at least expounded upon in my brain. No, I don't think their marriage was unhealthy because of the gendered expectations and the roles that they were expected to fit into. I think their marriage, in a lot of ways, was founded on mutual admiration and, for the most part, a good amount of respect. Richard respected Emily's talents as they were. There were moments where it was clear that he didn't value her contributions. Well, not even so much that he didn't value her contributions, but there's those moments where, like, he says to Emily in season 6 when Rory is out of Yale, he's like, I don't want that life for her. She has more to do, more to be. And so it's clear that he kind of looks down on that. I don't know if it's just because he wants something specific for Rory or because he just doesn't recognize that he's fed into it his whole life, but it's sort of a hypocritical thing for him to sort of accept it from his own wife and not accept it in his granddaughter, if that's her choice. But so, like, there are moments where he could do better on the respect front, but I don't think it's the expectations or the roles themselves that would make a relationship unhealthy. It would be instances where, in patriarchy, it would typically be the man being abusive in his patterns of control, financially or physically or economically, right? It would be just a complete lack of communication or respect for each other that would make it an unhealthy relationship. And they seem to work well together. And so just the mere presence of those expectations doesn't automatically make that a thing, even in modern marriages. But it's certain other ideas about, maybe submissiveness or control, manipulation, all those kinds of things. That is when a relationship like that is so rigidly gendered can start to creep into dangerous or unhealthy territory. And Richard and Emily got married in the 60s, which is only just when like gender started becoming a separate concept from sex. This is when feminists started using the term for things that were more mediated by social and cultural expectation, when we started to recognize that that's what was happening. And so they got together at a time when people were only just starting to understand this concept, and yet they were still able to kind of transcend and find peace and happiness in these roles, despite all the changes of society as they were progressing through their relationship. But where that became a problem is when Lorelai wanted to start deviating from that more traditional path. I hope that made sense. I'm like hopped up on cough syrup, so like I really hope that I'm being cogent here. But
you are phenomenally well. I will say that. I followed you on every bullet point that you addressed there. I wholeheartedly agree. Do you think, I'll follow this up with a question. I agree that Emily and Richard's marriage was healthy in that they didn't have those gendered expectations hindering them in a way where it became abusive or overly problematic. But do you think that there were ever moments, and I think of maybe specifically Emily's involvement with the DAR, Richard's involvement with, businessmen and constantly having to take phone calls and host social engagements, which he counted on Emily to orchestrate and socialize and plan for. Do you think any of that was something where, had those norms not and those expectations been placed on them from like, I'm the spouse and the female within this marriage, and I'm the husband and the male within this marriage, and so this is what the society and the culture that we've been raised into expects of us. Do you think that Emily and Richard would have wanted that for themselves had those things not existed, or were they just leading the lives that were expected of them, but they were innately and perhaps marginally unhappy?
I mean, again, that requires a lot of speculation, because the way we are raised does have such an impact on what we believe and how we behave. And I think they were raised into believing that that was the natural way of things. And so it's really hard to say. I don't think they exhibited any particular examples of times when they wanted to break out of that. I think we saw some lamentation from Emily about her role at certain times, like seen in a mall where she's like, all I do is shop and plan events. And later, after Richard has his heart attack, she's like, I know nothing about the finances or the home. And then after Richard passes, when she's like, I've never bought anything large myself, she has these flashes of a desire for something a little bit more. But I think she was so, I don't know if I can come up with any other word than indoctrinated by the culture that she was brought up in, to believe that like that's just how it was. Even with the rise of second wave feminism at the time, I don't think she ever saw an alternative for herself. Mm-hmm. What about you? Do you have a different take on that than I do?
I think maybe we got a glimpse of it in the revival when she takes the job at the museum, and we see that she has such a passion for science and actually having a career path and being like, and actually just having a job that is separate from the role of being a dutiful housewife and a social events planner for her husband. I wish we would have gotten more of it, because I feel like Emily Gilmore had such a life to live and to lead that was diminished by, it hurts me to say it, I feel like maybe that was diminished by her marriage to Richard. And had she had a spouse that was not expecting that from her, or if she had been born into a family or a different social class that wouldn't hold her to those standards, maybe her own pursuit of happiness would have just been that much greater and that much more seen and available to her. But I feel like she relegated herself to the life that she was expected to live as Richard's wife. And so we don't get a glimpse of what could have been from Emily Gilmore until the revival. And I'm glad that she has it in, her older age, and that she'll at least get a few years of that. But it hurts my heart to think that she was holding herself back from that happiness for so long in so many ways.
Yeah. And that makes me think of the gendered expectations of parenthood as well, because one aspect of the expectation on her was not only to be a wife, but a mother as well. And, motherhood feels like the default option. Obviously, the show centers largely around motherhood. It's kind of like the crux of the show is the gendered expectation that women will be mothers or want to be mothers. Even women in the show who aren't particularly jazzed about it or actively trying to do it have kids. Like, look at Lane in season 7. She never mentioned anything about wanting kids, really. Like, she might have mentioned it in passing, like, someday if I have a kid, XYZ. But, she just gets knocked up on her honeymoon. And, there's no talk about, family planning or other options for them or anything. It's just like, well, guess this is my life now. And a lot of people are disappointed in her character trajectory, which we'll talk about more in detail when we get to Lane's character study. But people these days ask women, when are you going to have kids? Not, do you want to have kids? It's seen as like, well, obviously this is what womanhood is because this is what our bodies naturally do, which, we never had options before. I think sometimes we forget that, like, on the scale of human history, all of these choices and these beliefs about, women in the workforce and choice and family planning are like really, really new. Even like less than 100 years ago, we didn't have contraception. It was just, it was the way things went because there was literally nothing to prevent it. But now we recognize that we have autonomy and we have choice. And so it's still so ingrained in our culture that women must clearly want to be mothers, and that anyone who doesn't is just fooling themselves or will change their mind. And it comes down to, medical interference sometimes when, women want to permanently sterilize themselves and doctors are like, we need your husband's permission first. Oh, you're not married? Well, like, come back to us later and then also get your husband to sign. And it's like, what if I'm gay? What if I'm, genetically predisposed to a bunch of stuff that I don't want to pass on to another generation? What if I'm chronically fatigued and have medical issues of my own that prevent me from, like, feeling like I can actually attempt the massive event that is parenthood? There's just, like, so little concern for women's concerns about parenthood, and there's so little acceptance that there's any other life path but motherhood. And I think that comes through in the show quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I could completely take us off on another path based off of what you just said, with it being such a modern day concept and science and contraception and everything that is so readily available to us. But for the sake of keeping us within talking about this show, everything that you just said leads me to wanting to talk about one specific character within this show who went up against a lot of this. I think you probably know where I'm going, but we haven't talked about her a lot on this podcast yet. So I'm very excited to bring her to the forefront now for the purpose of this conversation. But let's talk about Sherry.
Yes. I mean, again, take the deviled eggs. Very Sherry heavy episode. It's the most we ever get of her, really. And then, dear Emily and Richard, and then she disappears forever. So perfect time to talk a lot about Sherry.
So let's start off with the fact that I have a C-section scheduled for 5 p.m. and that's when my child is going to enter into the world, because that's when I deem it appropriate. And we're going to have a shower and a party, and it's going to be green balloons. Because even though I know I'm having a girl, it's still going to be green. She completely forgoes like the pink and blue concept, makes the party what she wants of it. I do think she's inherently largely misguided with thinking that she's going to have a C-section and that her child is going to enter the world on her terms and when she wants it. But there's so much to unpack with her and how she approaches her entry and her foray into motherhood, what she expects from herself, what she expects from Chris, even the roles that she expects Lorelai and Rory to fill. Because when she has her baby shower party, she's saying like, "Oh, Lorelai, you're kind of an aunt, and Rory, you're the half sister. So I expect you to fulfill XYZ in terms of these roles and be a part of my daughter's life in this way." So there's a lot that we can talk about, but I think the first question and the first thing that I will pose to you is, how do you feel about how she approached her birth plan and how she expected her daughter to enter into this world and how she saw motherhood going for her and even the expectations that she was placing on herself?
Yeah, she's one of those type A people who is very rigid and planned and considered. And she's not the only person who has scheduled a C-section. There are good reasons to do that. But the fact that you have a presentation at 10 and then a C-section at 5 is maybe not one of them. I don't know. Mm-hmm. And, I sort of brought this up last week. We were talking about mom shaming. And in the chat, I was sort of getting to this, but like, I referenced Cersei Lannister from the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones when Ned Stark has sort of like a declaration about the illegitimacy of Robert Baratheon's heirs and the fact that Stannis is now going to be King of Westeros. And she literally just looks at the paper and like rips it in half. Is this supposed to be your shield? like paper shield. That's kind of how I feel about birth plans. It sounds weird to say that, but life and motherhood and pregnancy often do not go to plan, and certain things are just completely out of our control. And so I think we can have an idea of what we want and how we want to approach things and strategies and, tactics that we can employ. We can talk all we want about like our hard lines in the sand of, I don't want this, but if it's medically necessary, it's medically necessary. And so I think a lot of times it's sort of like an exercise in trying to feel like we're in control of a situation that's just absolutely freaking terrifying. It is, it's a hard one. And there are a lot of things that women are not told about pregnancy and postpartum. It's just sort of like this weird taboo. And I think people are starting to talk about it on the internet more. I've been like, there are some YouTubers I've watched for years who have recently become parents and have told their stories about this. And I'm like, excuse me, nobody has ever said that ever before. Like, what? People just don't tell us. And I don't understand why. Like, it's so fundamental to the experience that we need to like be prepared for. And for some reason, we just don't talk about it. And so when you're trying to plan for these things, you just have to remember that like life usually doesn't go to plan. And Sherry was incapable of recognizing that. And so she had all these expectations of what this experience was going to be like for her. And she even says it to Lorelai at the party. She says, or one of her friends is like, I'm surprised you're even doing this because you never really struck me as a baby person. And she's like, I'm not a baby person. Like Chris is the baby person. And like, I'll be there when she has like legs to dance, basically,
Yeah, I want a ballerina.
Yeah, exactly. So just the expectations on this kid from before it's even born. And like you said, the expectations on Chris to be like a primary caretaker for an infant. Because that's like not the phase of life that you're really here for. Like, you don't get to make that choice when you're a parent. Like you got to recognize that you kind of have to be there for the whole thing. And like, it'll be seasonal, it'll be phase based and you have to adapt at each stage, but You don't get to be like, I'm not a baby person. And then
Yeah, but that
just
was
be like, I want
this
kids.
whole thing to me was exactly why Sherry was never cut out to be a mother, nor should she ever be, because she went into this like thinking, oh, I have a girl, that's what I wanted. She's going to again be my ballerina. That's what I foresee for her. She's going to be brought up and conform into those gender roles and those gender stereotypes in terms of perhaps fashion and hobbies and a career path and live the life that I want for her and pursue all of those things. But it's like, what if she doesn't want to be a ballerina, Sherry? What if she wants to be a football player?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
what if
would Sherry have taken issue with that? And I feel like, unfortunately, she probably would have, and would have just been like, hang on, wait, you want to do what now? Like, that's not what I want for you. That's not, I don't think that's appropriate with, like, girls don't do that. Like, unfortunately, I could have seen Sherry falling into that hole of just being like, you're not going to do that because that's not what's appropriate for you. It's not, I think, the reason why Sherry ran away from her kid or bailed on her or gave up on Gigi. I think there was a lot of other things that were coming into play there. But at the very core of everything, Sherry, I don't think, was ever cut out to be a mother, nor do I think she ever should have been, nor do I think she ever really wanted. I don't think she ever wanted to be. I think she had blinders on as to what motherhood and what parenthood was really like. And when her daughter was finally born and she realized, oh my gosh, this is like hella hard and super difficult, and I'm not cut out to be a parent or raise a child for, again, so many reasons, on top of the fact that I don't think she could even manage herself at that point. She bailed on her kid. And it's heartbreaking because her daughter never deserved that. She's going to have lifelong damage from it. Sherry should have never been a mother. And it's unfortunate that the gender stereotypes that she was even envisioning for her own daughter, I think, played a part into why she abandoned her kid.
Yeah, possibly. It kind of goes back to what I was saying about the gendered expectations of parenthood. Women are expected to be mothers. It's like something we have to cross off our cosmic to-do list, apparently. And, anyone who doesn't want to is somehow unfeminine or not a real woman. So there's that side of things. And then there's this sort of other side of it where, by all accounts, she's a modern woman in a high-powered job. She has a lot of economic power. And she has a deep commitment to succeeding professionally. Active labor be damned. So I think that was part of it as well, where she sort of is emblematic of this feminist desire to do it all. The sort of like girl bossing mentality, the like pre-lean in version of female empowerment. And I think the work-life balance or lack thereof that, the sort of modern version of feminism likes to sell us isn't really attainable all the time. And it puts a lot of pressure on us to do everything, especially with Chris being in a job that requires him to travel so much. I think she underestimated just how difficult that was going to be. And they sort of maybe fell into these preordained roles based on what their parents were like. Chris was the breadwinner and he was on the road all the time, much like Richard Gilmore. So there's that element of stuff as well. Yeah, Sherry is a very interesting one. I kind of agree that she probably shouldn't have been a mother because it doesn't. It's weird. The show is internally contradicting itself because when we first meet Sherry, she tells Rory that she was contemplating single motherhood, like going it alone. But then by the time her baby shower rolls around, she's like, I may not even have gone through with it. And her friends are like, we didn't see you as the baby type. So not sure how to take that, but she really wasn't probably cut out or prepared for it. Nope. And yeah. So what about the actual baby shower itself, like, how do you take the green thing, for example? Like, you know, green is the new pink, and you know, it's so like pink is so last week. What do you make of these sort of like trends in gendering kids and in gender reveals and all that kind of stuff?
I will say, again, I want to choose my words carefully because I don't want to offend anybody. Personally, in my life, if you're having a kid, congratulations. I don't care if it's a boy. I don't care if it's a girl. Doesn't matter to me what that child decides it wants to grow up and be. You're bringing a person into the world that is congratulatory in and of itself. I think the notion of gender reveals and gender reveal parties and having that something be so heavily celebrated in a way that I think just perhaps even is taking away from the notion of what is actually happening and how jubilant that should be. I don't know. I hate the whole concept. It makes me sound terrible, but like my friends have had kids. It never mattered to me what they were having. I'm just over the moon for them regardless. So when you're having a party and you're just like, oh, it's a girl, it's a boy, I'm just like, great. I'm still ecstatic for you either way. It doesn't matter. I think perhaps it takes away from focusing on other things that are more important, because we're honing in so much on gender that it's just like, let's just be happy that this person is existing and that we're getting hopefully what is going to be a healthy and well-raised and well-rounded individual coming into the world. Don't care what the gender is. Don't care how, like, what they grow up to be, like, and how they see themselves. Like, as long as they're happy and you're happy as a parent, like, I'm fine with all of it. So that was me inserting probably a lot of my own personal beliefs in there, but relating it back to Sherry's party. Like, you want to have green balloons? Have green balloons. You want to have yellow balloons? Have yellow balloons. I don't care what color balloons you have at a celebration party, like at a party that is celebrating your child's entry into this world and that they're coming and that they're going to be here. Yes, we have, like, normally pink is for girls, blue is for boys. I don't care. Have whatever color balloons you want to. I hate that Lorelai was just like, oh, they're in green balloons? What is this kid, like an alien or something? And that even Rory was just like, yeah, it's weird. But it leads me to another thought that I had with, there's that whole scene at that party when Lorelai goes into the bathroom and she's just having a breakdown over a child that has not even been birthed yet. And Rory has to come into the bathroom and talk her off this ledge and just be like, you okay? Like, let's calm down a little bit here. And Lorelai's just losing it. I'll pose this question to you. Do you think that Lorelai was having that moment and having this breakdown because she had found out that Sherry was having a girl and that this girl was potentially going to be either competition or a child that Sherry was going to try and parallel to Rory and hold up against Rory? And I can see how Lorelai would take issue with that because she thinks her daughter's perfect. She doesn't want even a half-sister competing. Do you think she was having that meltdown because Sherry was specifically having a girl? And do you think it would have been different if Sherry had a boy on the way?
That's a really excellent question. I mean, I think there was a level of jealousy regardless. I think stuff that Sherry had already said about Christopher's involvement and behavior during this pregnancy with her was a bigger part of the tailspin because, she was like, he's been so attentive and so there for me, when that's not an experience that Lorelai got with him because she was 16 and he was 16 and she didn't want him to peg his life to her or this child at that time. And she was the one who made the choice to go this alone. And and not hold him to anything. And so now that Christopher has a partner and they're more mature and they're living together, and they're at a place in their life when bringing children into the world is more typical, she's starting to see a side of Christopher that not only is she jealous that she didn't get, but that she doesn't want to admit to herself that she wants. And so I think there is an element of fear that Gigi will replace Rory and that like they'll never see Chris again, even though there's a lot of baggage and animosity from the whole situation to begin with. It's still a consideration for her. Even back in Bracebridge dinner, she was like, jealous of Sherry and jealous of this life that they were starting to build together. And she doesn't want to admit it to herself how much she wanted that sort of like nuclear family, mom and dad kind of vibe. But yeah, that breakdown in the bathroom, Rory, Gigi, Oprah, Uma. I love that. But I think it would have been a slightly different dynamic if he'd had a boy. I guess men are sort of expected to be different when they have sons versus when they have daughters. And so it is a little easier to more directly compare Rory and Gigi and how Chris engages with them both. Whereas a son would be a very different dynamic. And so it's very hard to say exactly how he would have been with a son, especially because we don't see a ton of like really hyper-masculine stuff coming from Chris. He doesn't seem like a dude bro who's just like really into sports or anything. And he might be. Although in season 7, he wears a salmon shirt and Lorelai lambasts him for it. And so like, again, stereotypical enforcement of gender norms. We'll get to more of those incidences later, but he's not super hyper masculine, and so I don't know how he would have been with a son, but it's a lot easier to directly compare his relationships with his daughters from the different women. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Do you think that then Lorelai's response was just unfounded?
It's hard to say if her response was like over exaggerating or whatever, because it's an emotional thing and emotions are not always the most logical. And again, she was sort of shanghaied into coming to this thing in the first place when she never really cared about Cherry or got on with her necessarily. And the situation is just very awkward. And so I don't blame her for having this sort of like emotional reaction to it. It's sort of she's viewing the path not taken, and that can be tough for people. So I don't want to say that she was completely off her rocker, but I do find it funny that she tried to rearrange the medicine cabinet because, as someone who's a little particular about the placement of my stuff, I'm like, it's kind of funny to like mess with someone that way, but also like not funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Unless you have something else that you want to say with Sherry, I want to move us on to some of maybe the more not as well thought of, but just fun instances in the show where we see gender expectations coming into play within scenes, like certain character moments, but characters themselves. I'll say this. Let's talk about Kirk.
Oh my god, one of my favorite characters.
You know what? I'm not even gonna pose you a question. I'm just gonna say, let's talk about Kirk. What do you think about how he either held or did not hold to the notion of gendered expectations with how he lived his life? Go.
Kirk, say no more. He, I think for the most part, sort of adhered to several male stereotypes, even the less savory ones, like the kidult living in his mom's basement kind of thing. That's stereotypically attached to men. But the thing that comes to mind most when it comes to gender portrayals and Kirk is obviously women of questionable morals.
Mm-hmm.
When Lulu gets sick and he dons that dress, and Taylor is just completely taken aback and is like, oh my God, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And
What a
so
good moment.
it's one of the few instances when a man wears something feminine in the show. And it's played for laughs, and it's in an episode called Women of Questionable Morals. So not only do we have sort of the very non-PC discussion of sex workers in the show to begin with, my girlfriend's the whore! My girlfriend's the whore!
Yeah, that would so not fly in 2023, but
yeah. So we have that aspect of things, and then we have the sort of like almost drag aspect of things. And the only other instance of drag we have in the show is Lorelai's bachelorette party, rather. So those are kind of the only instances I can think of when men are portrayed in traditionally feminine clothing. So I am linking those moments in my mind, and I'm like, these are things that are played for laughs. They're not played as legitimate expressions or anything like that. I mean, obviously the joke is really on Taylor in that moment. I think it's less about maybe how Kirk is dressed than the surprise on Taylor's face. But there's just this, that sort of undercurrent of casual homophobia and a distaste for drag that runs through that. So, lol, yikes. And one other thing that comes to mind about Kirk and gender is the time when he's watching Lulu's dog and he brings it in that pink dotted bag, which is, according to Valerie Campbell, who's coming to FanFest, by the way, more on that later. According to Valerie, it's the exact same bag that Elle Woods had Bruiser in.
yes.
Yeah, and so it's super cute.
Get out of my head.
Yeah, right? We love Elle Woods here. And Luke says, what's in the gay bag? So again, a man with a stereotypically feminine accessory, even though it's not even his, and it's, it's got a dog in it. And, Mr. Lumberjack Danes over here is like, having a purse is gay. God, get out of here with that. So those are the two things that stand out for me for Kirk. Do you have
you wanna wear something other than your flannel and your backwards baseball cap one of these days? Come at me.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on those ones or any additional Kirk moments that jump to mind?
Not specific moments. But I will say, and I think you'll understand why, I appreciate Kirk's passion for theater and performance art, and I say that loosely because what he was doing was very wide open interpretive theater art that I have thoughts on. It was, don't get me started, it's weird, but sometimes that's what theater is meant to be. But I feel like it was bold of him to do that. I don't think that he recognized oh, I'm being bold in this moment, but I feel like I just picture your run-of-the-mill dude bro just being like, what is he doing? That's so gay, oh, get him, other choice words that I'm not gonna say that could be thrown at him when people are seeing that and judging him for it. And it's was it weird? Yeah.
But more for content than context, shall we say.
I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're aiming for. Ew. To quote ew. Suki and Lorelai, ew. No, but
Kirk's dying.
Oh, is he being birthed again? Nope, just dying. Oh, what is yeah. But I feel like he would be unnecessarily judged for perhaps even his love of theater and performance art, which again was gross and weird, but he was doing something that felt right for him and that was bringing him joy in that moment. And it's another thought that I had just in general. As as I was preparing for this episode, and I don't want to get us too much into the weeds about it, but career paths being paralleled to gender.
Mm-hmm.
And how sometimes
I brought that up in Working Moms. Like, I gave a whole list of
exactly
professions on the show go back and watch that episode if you want to see like the list read out. But that's absolutely a great point.
Yeah, I don't want us to get too much into it there, but I feel like sometimes we can say like, oh, that's a man's job, or oh, that's a woman's job, and it's like it's not. It can be anyone's job. So I just hate the potential way that we parallel those things. I hate that we can kind of pass that judgment in a similar way on what Kirk was doing. Again, weird, but he was being truthful to himself in that moment, and he was grossing people out, but he was not actively hurting anybody or attempting to cause pain in any sort of way. So you do you, Kirk. And the town will still love you for your weirdness anyway.
Yeah. Spinning off of that, let's talk about Luke a little more, because there's another scene that I'm thinking of where Luke is just kind of a gender essentialist. Any guesses on the one that's coming to mind?
Few, but balalaikas?
Balalaikas.
With the soccer
But
player?
Boys are boys and girls are girls. The girls were right to gasp like that. Let's be real.
Yeah. Go ahead, and then I will pick up on where you leave off.
Yeah, it was just one of the most blatant examples of gendered thinking. And again, the show was lambasting it a little bit. Like the writers clearly didn't hold that belief, and they were using Luke as a way to lampoon the idea that women's sports should be prim and proper and like not gritty or physical in the slightest. Like, women are incapable of aggression, and men are just, out there tackling each other and fighting, and it's not always the case. And a lot of times women in sport actually have to work a lot harder on their physicality and play a lot cleaner because they're trying to gain respect from the establishment that prioritizes men's sports because they're more entertaining. Like, so it's just kind of frustrating to, again, see a guy who wears nothing but flannel and jeans and a backwards baseball cap come in and be like, you should be more feminine and you shouldn't try to be like the boys.
Yeah. I'll start out by saying that he and Lorelai, because it wasn't just him, there was an argument to be made that those girls were being unnecessarily aggressive, because when you're seeing active amounts of blood on a soccer pitch from preteen girls, maybe scale it back a little bit. You don't have to be causing nosebleeds or breaking bones to win a game. And I appreciate that one girl's just, I don't know what the right word to use is here. I appreciate her spirit with her being like, we gotta kick some butt. You go, girl. Don't cause physical injury that puts people in the hospital to do it. You can make your point elsewhere. So yeah. Like,
if the boys are playing that way, then that maybe that's a problem with the boys, and you shouldn't try to.
That's a problem with the boys as well. You don't need to emulate that. But that was also just comedic writing that I also was there to be comedic writing, so I appreciate that. But for Luke to just be like, maybe just play more like girls should play. As someone who was raised playing sports, I know you were as well. GTFO, Luke. I am going to play sports ball in the same way that any other person would. I am going to make use of my talents in the best way that I possibly can. And if you want to equate my talents to how a boy plays or should be playing or does play, that's probably a compliment to me in a weird way, because maybe you're saying that like my talents are on that level too. I don't know. But don't diminish those girls in the way that he did with saying like, oh, like look prim and proper on the soccer field, and just have fun, girls, and have a nice, quaint, quiet, cute game without causing the bodily injury or playing like boys do. And so I think that girl was who, again, I don't want to tangentialize Eastside Tilly.
Tinfoil theories coming soon.
Tinfoil theory. She's Eastside Tilly. I think she was absolutely right to just be like, so we're both like that. I love that line where she's just like, so we're just supposed to play like a bunch of cute little girls. Like, no. And Luke's just like, all right, I can't. But like, he was designating them into this category of just like, have fun, girls, but just look cute and pretty while you're playing your sports ball, and don't be aggressive. Don't do any of those things that are potentially, too masculine. And yeah, that girl was right to put Luke in his place and just be like, no. Gotta kick some butt. That's it. We're here to take names, take numbers. That's it.
Kick names and kick ass.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I love Marvel. Anyway. Yeah, another one that comes to mind for Luke for me is in Last Week Fights, This Week Tights, when Lorelai's like, what about a manly wreath in your hair? And he's like, there's no such thing as a manly wreath.
Mm-hmm. What is that though? Like, I can't
Julius
even wrap my head around it.
Or you can't even wrap it around your head.
And then he died.
I'm sorry, I will leave now. I'm ejecting myself from this conversation for that.
We've exited the building. That wraps us up for this week. Come back and join us next week. We'll see you then. Have a good night. No, we're still
My
here.
sincere apologies for the bad jokes, but like it's all my brain can do right now.
Yeah. As much as we all love Luke, and we've illustrated this in episodes prior, the man has his faults, and unfortunately one of his faults is having a warped view of gender notions and what is appropriate for women and men, what is appropriate for girls and boys. I think Lorelai tries to correct him on it sometimes, maybe not as much as she should, but if there was ever anything that I could hope for Luke as a character in terms of progression, it's maybe putting some of those notions aside. And if Luke, he has April. I won't, lead us into that at all because that's its own separate conversation. But if Luke were to raise a child from birth or from infancy, I would hope that he's not passing those judgments on his child or putting forth those stereotypes or those notions on his own kid of like, you need to do this and you need to do this. And if you're a boy, I expect this. If you're a girl, I expect this. And having those just warped ideas come into play with how he raises his child. Just let your kid be who they're going to be. I think Lorelai would probably do well with that. And I would hope that as a partner and or a spouse to Luke, that she would lead him there.
Yeah, she was pretty insistent on sort of like letting Rory be Rory. And so I would hope that she would encourage Luke to do the same. But I also don't know how that would extend to prescriptive gender ideals because, despite being different from her mother and wanting to be unique and quirky and autonomous and not care about all those other social norms and expectations, she is still very feminine, sometimes hyper feminine. She's very in pink. She puts, feather onto hammers and paints little figurines on liquid paper bottles. She's very feminine. She sews. The way she dresses, it's very like form-fitting, close to her body, typically feminine. So, she's not exactly a a gender non-conforming free spirit in that way, and neither is Rory. So I don't know if she has that much sort of understanding of that and what it might do to a child to be so prescriptive about it. I don't know how she portrayed those things to Rory. Hard to say. So, I mean, I would hope that she would be like, well, can't you just let your kid be your kid no matter what the situation was? But speaking of Lorelai, I have another thought about her. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about sort of gendered expectations for economic roles and jobs and all that kind of stuff. And I was thinking about Lorelai's childhood a little bit, in the sense that Richard did say that Lorelai was the brightest in her class before she dropped out, and we can see that Lorelai is clearly very smart and very resourceful. So it would have been expected that she would go to Yale or Harvard, perhaps, if she had the grades and was able to get in, or at least somewhere like Smith or Vassar, to get a cute nickname, to marry rich, to do all those things in line with the prescriptions of the feminine roles of her class. So she seemingly was expected to get an education and a husband, an MRS degree, if you will. And that education might have been simply a pathway for her to find an appropriate life partner.
There it is. There it is.
I don't think,
sorry.
Yes. But I don't think we ever hear anything from Richard and Emily about what they expected from Lorelai professionally. There never seemed to be any expectation that she would join the family business or that she would have any particular type of job. And so the expectations were purely like, this is just what you do because, like, you have to have an education and we have the money to put you through school, but really your job is to be a wife and a mother. And she totally shucked that. But it made me think as well, on that same topic, about Logan, because Logan is not the eldest Huntsberger. Honor is his older sister. And again, the Huntsbergers are massively wealthy, totally had the money to send Honor to school. It seems like she went to private schools and probably some sort of prestigious university. And then she marries Josh, and we have no idea what she does after that. But why wasn't Honor in contention to run the Huntsberger empire? Like, this was already the mid-2000s. Women were working. Like, why is it assumed that it was going to pass to the male heir? Like, what is up with that?
You want the crude answer? I mean, my answer's going to be the same, but do you want me to put it crudely or do you want me to try and put it nicely?
Crudely, always.
Because she doesn't have a penis.
Hey, there it is. Yeah.
That's it, folks. We can close up shop. That's the answer to that question. There really is nothing more to it, unfortunately. And that's like, my brain wants to explode having that be the end all be all, but unfortunately that is the end all be all.
Sad but true.
She doesn't have a dick.
Yeah, it's
so it's gonna be Logan all day, every day, and you can go play house with your husband for the rest of your life.
Yeah, again, just shaking my head. SMH. It's bullshit, but it's true. Like, these sort of expectations that, you know, the men will be in the positions of economic power and women don't want that or won't be able to attain it because they're likely to get knocked up at some point. It's just, why do we do this to ourselves?
I don't know, but I mean, going back to what you said, I think it was the same path, like, that Emily and Richard had for Lorelai. Like, they were putting her through a private education in her middle and high school years. Had she been able to get into an Ivy, she would have attended one because they would have paid for it. But Emily and Richard were always going to do everything within their power to place Lorelai into the best collegiate environment in terms of, like, just a notoriety sort of path that they could get her into, even if it wasn't an Ivy. But they weren't doing it. I don't want to dismiss their care and their interest and their involvement in Lorelai with wanting to see her succeed as a person. But they weren't doing it 100% and wholly for wanting her to be successful as perhaps like a single successful businesswoman entrepreneur. I think they were doing it because at the end of the day, there was always going to be a percentage or a part of it that's just like, she is more appealing to a husband and a man of higher social status and our social class if she attends one of these really, really prestigious schools as opposed to a community college or never going to school in general or never pursuing education, to where if we can, I wouldn't even want to think about like an arranged marriage or just like marrying her off or trying to set her up with, this is our, like Emily, like if she has a DAR member or Richard has a business partner, it's like, oh, like this is their son. Like, look at what a nice man he is. Like, he's successful. He's going to be making 7 figures within the span of like the next 5 years. And here's our daughter who just, I think if they had to presenting Lorelai Gilmore, and you can say like, here's our daughter. She attended Brown and graduated with a degree in business, which we never expect her to use because we just want her to get married to a nice, wealthy gentleman. But here she is with a business degree from Brown versus here's our daughter presenting Lorelai Gilmore. She went to community college for 18 months and got a degree in cooking or hospitality or something that they would deem to be lesser. In their mind, it's like, well, she's never going to get the man that we want her to get. Any of our friends are not going to want to marry off their son or consider their son for our daughter because she hasn't been held up to the standards that they would want for a partner for their son. There's just like, it's garbage. But I feel like they were wanting that for her. Again, not just for her own well-being and for her own sake, but just because it was going to make them look better and make her more like just marriage material.
Socially acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Ugh. It's disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if Honor had any interest in the family business or if it fell on Logan because Honor was like, hell no, not that. Like, that's not the career path I want for myself. But like, why should she be allowed to? I mean, women should be able to do whatever, but like, why should she be able to opt out, but Logan can't?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we ever saw enough of Honor for me to be able to accurately answer that question. It could have been that Honor was smart enough to realize, like, my parents are garbage human beings, and I am not going to live the life that they want me to live and assume the mantle and take on and carry the Huntsberger name in terms of, career path and, success and just being like the trophy Huntsberger that they want me to be because I'm the firstborn. Maybe that was it. Maybe in their minds, and I speak from like, not Honor, but, maybe from them, they were just like, our daughter isn't smart enough or worthy enough in our minds to carry the weight of the Huntsberger name and run with this. So we're going to pass it on to Logan because we deem him like smart enough and reasonable and worthy of carrying that weight when Honor is not. Whether it was something that she bypassed because she was like, nope, I don't want it. Or whether her parents were just like, nope, she can't have it because we don't think she's good enough for it. So we're going to pass this on to Logan. Or whether they just passed it on, whether she was or was not smart enough under their distinction. Because at the end of the day, Logan's the boy, she's the girl. So we're just going to give it to him by default because of that. Whatever the reason, it's like, it's problematic no matter what. And it's detrimental to Honor. It's detrimental to Logan. It places an inordinate amount of stress upon both of those children and both of them as adults, and none of it is right or healthy. And it's just those gender expectations and those gender like what we want from our children, whether they're female, male, and how they choose to live their lives growing up, when you're passing on those expectations and then dictating how your children's lives are going to be because of what you expect from them based on what you deem them to be in terms of gender, the damage that you're doing is horrendous and irreparable sometimes. And it's not okay.
Yeah. You said something that niggled at my brain. The Huntsberger name. It might boil down to that stupid inheritance thing where it's like, you know, that she's going to go off and get married, and therefore she's not going to be a Huntsberger anymore. She's going to, you know, be a part of a new family and take somebody else's name. And one, that's crap. And two, you know, it kind of speaks to the deeper origins of these ideas of roles. You know, the social unit used to be, or the smallest social unit used to be quite a bit larger. It used to be more like extended families, communities, clans, tribes. Maternity was never really in question, but I think we overemphasize how much paternity mattered a long time ago. You know, there were plenty of instances where, you know, humans in hunter-gatherer societies were not monogamous and paternity didn't matter. When it started to matter was when we invented agriculture, and suddenly land became important, and we started privatizing the production of food, and suddenly it became economically advantageous to have more land. But then the question became, well, what happens to that land when a man dies? And so they started shifting from matrilineal societies to patrilineal societies. And from there, it was just a hop, skip, and a jump to an oppressive patriarchy. Drank. Among our friend group, we have some fellow YouTuber friends who started the patriarchy drinking game anytime patriarchy would come up in a stream. So cheers to AR if you're watching.
AR,
we're starting that habit. We love it, and we're carrying on the legacy. But you know, and suddenly they decided that men would be in control of the land and that it would pass to the boys, and then the boys would have heirs of their own. And the only way to ensure the continuance of that system was to, you know, enforce monogamous marriage. So, you know, there were economic reasons to marry, and there were religious reasons to marry, and there were all these sort of like practical considerations when forming a nuclear family unit that maybe didn't have the best interests of people or the community in mind, and they started isolating us from our communities and maybe even our deeper natures. And because, you know, you hear a lot of rhetoric these days about the natural order of things, and it's basically just an alt-right dog whistle for like traditional family values, as if the traditional family has always existed and is our like true basic form, and when it's not. Anthropologically speaking, we know this. Like anyone who's ever read about history and all this kind of stuff kind of knows that we haven't always been like this, and it's not sort of a linear progression back through time where like it's been a little bit here, a little bit here. It's been like, no, there was a massive shift, you know, 13,000 years ago or whatever it was, when our society went through a massive change that sort of brought this on. And there were other massive leaps where it was like further entrenched, especially, you know, when we got to canon law and common law, and colonialism was a huge one. You know, this is sort of like the Western ideal of gender and patriarchy. Drink. That was brought over from Europe, white Europe, to, you know, wield as a weapon against indigenous cultures where gender norms were far less rigid and were far more fluid, which just goes to show that our natural state isn't in these like prescriptive things that we recognize in our modern world as masculine and feminine, but that there were much wider categories that humans could fall into, and much broader roles that they could take on. So how did I even get on this train of thought? It's relevant, but like, how did I get here? How do I circle back? It's just, I think, right, it was the Logan Huntsberger name thing. So, it comes down to inheritance, and on a grander scale, it comes down to primogeniture. Once we started existing under a monarchy, then it became very important, for aristocrats to have lines of succession and for kings to have lines of succession to keep power in the hands of the few and the elite, and to ensure that they had a means of passing that power along their own lineage as a form of sort of like legacy. And now we've moved away from that. Most countries in the world now are some form of democracy, but I live in a constitutional monarchy, so there's that.
Yeah.
These larger socio-political questions have dominated a lot.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to even think what to circle back onto because that was just such a well-rounded thought. I will just circle back in the most generalistic of ways right now because we've been talking for almost 90 minutes at this point. So we should start probably winding this down. Is there anything within the context of the show that we haven't gotten to that you want to touch on quickly? Again, we never get to everything within these episodes. We always have 10 times the amount of thoughts and notes that, in terms of like what we get to versus what we want to get to. But is there anything that you want to touch on before we start closing this one out?
Right. I have one more thought sort of circling back that I didn't mention when we were talking about gender reveals. And that's Ballrooms and Biscotti. When Suki opens the shed for Lorelai and it's just all blue stuff.
Blue.
Yeah. And Jackson is, like the I don't want to know the sex of my baby. And just his sort of, hearkening to the good old days when men would wait in the delivery room with a cigar for their wife to give birth, as if it's not like a massively traumatic process that they need support and assistance through. Just one of those like gross idealizations of the past that is kind of insensitive and uncool. I don't think that's how it ultimately went down. I think it was a joke, but I think it maybe speaks to a larger attitude that the show has about idealizing the past and capitalizing on that nostalgia, which is something we talked about early on in our podcast. We had a whole discussion on nostalgia that sort of ties in here and sort of the like when nostalgia gets toxic discussion when it comes to gender. And again, how did I not even remember this until right now? We haven't even done a word about that damn daughter.
No, we haven't. We'll get back to it. We're not going to be able to touch on everything here. We've talked about that episode a little bit in previous episodes about just how super problematic that is. We will get back to it because the feministic nature of this show, bad boyfriends, reactions to bad boyfriends, all which are all episodes that we have up and coming and on the docket. All of it will come up again. That Dan Donna Reed is certain to come up again on so many instances, just because it's just like, what were you doing?
Yeah, it's and right there on a silver platter.
What were you doing?
The problems with it.
I think of the meme where it's like the animated character who's just like, what is this?
Yeah. Is this feminism?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's totally accurate. It's one of those episodes where I don't even think we have to talk about it all that much. Just go watch it and you'll be like, oh yeah. It just like the, it makes me think of the current sort of trad wife trend that is sort of taking over on YouTube and TikTok a little bit, where the aesthetic of the 1950s housewife and the idea of the financial privilege of being able to stay at home and sort of like opt out of our capitalist nightmare that we're living in seems really nice to people. And just sort of reading up on it or thinking about it lately, it made me think of Donna Reed because, you know, that outfit Rory wears is just, again, she's adopting the aesthetic without, I mean, I guess she probably was considering it a little deeper, but she was only 16 and maybe didn't have all the contacts she totally needed. She did some research on Donna Stone and realized she was more influential and powerful in the television production sphere than she thought originally. But just sort of adopting the aesthetic and the irony of that when it comes to, you know, choice and oppression and what that really meant for the women who lived that experience. And we're seeing a resurgence of that ideal today because we're living in such a, like I said, capitalist dystopia. And there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of change. And those are the times when we reach for tradition and the past and cling to it the hardest because we want something to provide existential security. And it's just a fiction. It's a flawed premise because it was probably worse than what we're living through right now. And reaching for the past isn't always the answer when we're scared of the future.
I honestly, like, I just want to close this out on that because I feel like reaching for the past when we should be going to the future. Like, how better do we end this? Like, that is spectacular.
Thanks.
And I think
I'm glad that Kate from the past made these notes so that current sick Kate could benefit from them.
Yeah.
I was looking toward the future. Yeah.
But brava. Like, I think that is the perfect summarization to this. And it encapsulates, again, we can't talk anymore, folks. It's been a rough week. Bear with us. I think it perfectly encapsulates.
It's emblematic of the week we've had.
Yeah, thank you for watching, everybody who is here. It encapsulates everything that we've been trying to hit home the past 90 minutes or so now. The past is the past. It has been largely problematic. The future will probably still be problematic. Human beings are still always in a learning phase. We're always trying to do better. It doesn't mean that we're always going to. But just going back to what you said, take the mistakes that we've made in the past, try to do better with them in the future. And if we can even minutely improve, I think we just need to chalk that up to a win at this point and just continue as a society and as a species, continuing to just try and learn better and make our future be better than the past, to go back to what you said.
Yeah, I think you said a few very illuminating things there. And, you know, we don't have to do what previous generations did. We can take what we've learned from science and advances and in understanding ourselves and advances in psychology and sexology. You know, we've learned a lot in the last 70 years or so about how humans interact and how we change. And I think we're a lot more fluid than we give ourselves credit for. And maybe we don't need to like cling so hard to these ideas of this is a man and this is a woman. And we should be more open and more exploratory with our gender expressions. And the show really didn't do that. It's kind of disappointing. But then again, emblematic of its time. So we can't always put our modern expectations onto things from the past. But I wanted to have this conversation and look at it through that lens as a way to show like our experience as human beings is so much more textured and layered and nuanced than just the gender binary that we're shown on TV, especially like when we go back and review things from the past. So you're right. This is a great way to close out on sort of like a meta point about like just there aren't even two sexes. Why are we so convinced there's two genders? Like, get over it. It's a spectrum. It's fluid. It's not even fixed. Like, people change expressions at different points in their lives, and what even being a member of a gender means to people varies so much. There's just as much variation within a gender as there is between the genders. So, just accept that and accept yourselves, love yourselves. This came to a really strange point, but you know what I mean.
Again, we're going to close this out by just saying, like, we can always do better as a society. We can always improve as human beings. And at the forefront of that, in terms of taking the past and trying to be better in the future, I'm going to steal this from one of our mutual friends. Just be excellent to each other.
Stev, if you're watching, shout outs.
Yeah, just at the forefront, love one another, be compassionate to other human beings. Everyone is going through a struggle. Everyone has their own ish going on. But at the forefront, lead with compassion, lead with understanding, lead with love and excellence towards other human beings. And that's all we can do. And hopefully that will allow us to be better as a society and human beings.
Yeah. Don't try to put each other into boxes so much and just accept individuals for the wonderful, beautiful snowflakes that they are.
Mm-hmm. That being said, as we continue on with our adventures, which I think that is a perfect capstone for this one, so we'll close this out there. What is coming up next for the Gilmore Way? What have we got on the docket for next week?
Speaking of beautiful individual snowflakes, next week we're going to be talking about how Lorelai and Rory are very different people. We already had an episode about their special relationship and, you know, how their dynamic works and where those sort of points of commonality are with them. But we sort of alluded to this in our episode about the Battle of the Boyfriends, how, you know, a lot of times Rory's men are compared so directly to Lorelai's men. And in a way, I can see the parallels, and we will discuss those a little bit more. But there are so many differences, and there's context differences in terms of, like, their ages and where they're at in their lives and the roles that the men play in their lives. And so we want to look at the sort of the points of differentiation between them, because I think sometimes we're so much like, oh, well, Rory is just a little Lorelai. And I think that does both of their characters a disservice. And I want to really like dig into it and pick it apart and sort of dismantle the idea that somehow that particular iteration of the circle of life or the following where you lead narrative device is like, it might be going astray a little bit to be so like one-to-one parallel. If that makes any sense. Was that grammatically correct? You tell me. I don't know.
It does. And if you haven't picked up on it, we obviously are going to have a lot of thoughts on that, because we can't even keep our what's coming up next synopsis at this point to 10 seconds. We're just immediately dishing out on that. So the Rory versus Lorelai thing is going to be, we have a lot to say.
Yeah.
And I think the fandom has a lot to say in terms of, maybe you think Rory and Lorelai are the same person. Maybe you think they're two different people. We're going to break it all down, highlight the similarities, highlight the differences. Come back and join us for that. That will be a good conversation. We're not going to spoil anything, but we also have some very interesting and I think really fun episodes coming up with some special guests within the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that. As we get closer to that and we establish those details, follow us on social media, keep watching our episodes, and we'll disclose more as those episodes get closer. But there's some good stuff coming up for the Gilmore Way, so stay tuned. We're excited for all of those things. Another thing we're excited for, FanFest. Again, every week we get closer. Fall in Maine is coming. If you have not purchased a ticket to FanFest, please go do so. It is going to be the most spectacular weekend that you will have in your life. If you're a GG fan, if you're not a GG fan, just go anyway. Like, there are going to be cast members from the show, behind the scenes people, wonderful human beings, such as ourselves, will be there, as well as many other just Gigi fans. Go buy a ticket to it. You will not regret it. We're excited for that. Come to Maine in 2023. That's all I can say. Just buy a ticket.
Yeah, it's a very special event. Like, everyone who's ever been has said it's just incredible. So don't sleep on it.
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, go back and watch some of our old episodes if you want more Gigi content. Again, stay tuned for what we have coming up in the weeks to come, because we promise there's some good stuff in the not so distant future that we're really excited about and we want to share with you. And just keep watching Gigi. Do your rewatches. Stay within the content. And highlighting what we kind of ended this episode with, all I can say is just, like, be excellent to one another.
Peace and be excellent.
Peace
Sorry,
and be excellent to one another.
We're just stealing Here Be Dragons sign off, just blatantly plagiarizing, but it's fine.
It's all right. I think our friends will forgive us.
Indeed.
But yeah, that'll end us out for this week. And until then, we will see you next Friday night for dinner.
Bye.
Arrivederci.